Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to David's Den. I'm David and I make videos about Stephen King, his novels, his short stories, and any adaptations that were made into film or television. And today I want to give you my kind of precursory thoughts and review on Billy Summers, Stephen King's newest novel. Now, I do want to say I'm sorry for anyone who watched the halfway through review and has been waiting eagerly with bated breath, as I'm sure you all have, for this video. I realized that I was about a couple weeks behind on Chapelwaite, the new series that's airing on Epix. I think episode 7 is supposed to air tonight of 10 episodes, so I have been furiously catching up on episode reactions for that. So please, go check those out, watch the series. I'm really enjoying it so far. The whole cast and crew is really nice. They've reached out and talked to me about the videos. Super cool to get that kind of reaction, so I suggest it. Definitely go watch it. Now, putting all of that aside, Chapelwaite, my apology, I'm sorry. Just want to say that during my last halfway through review, I didn't think I gave away too much. I didn't give away anything that wasn't there in the first maybe 20, 30 pages that I think, besides basic plot. And I'm sorry if anyone thought that I did. So I want to go ahead and say I'm going to try to do the same thing here, and I'm actually leaving a ton out that I want to talk about for later. But this is going to be a light spoiler, shouldn't ruin the book for you kind of review. So if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, perfectly okay. Just please be warned. I don't want anyone getting upset with me. Now, like I said in my halfway through review, if you're not familiar with my channel and the videos I make, I take really deep dives, in-depth analysis of the literary elements in a Stephen King work, and I'm going in publication order. I took a little break during this because Billy Summers is the first book to be published since I started this readathon. So I had to get the newest Stephen King book and I had to make a video on it. But I'm just giving you kind of my very basic thoughts right now and kind of like I said, fairly spoiler-free review rather than diving into that literary analysis. When we get to this, like in 743 years, because of how much Stephen King writes, when we get to it again in the readathon order, I'm going to be examining this in a deep dive sort of way. Okay, here we go. The premise is that Billy Summers goes into hiding in a small town because he's a hired assassin, and he's waiting for his mark to return to town at an unknown time. He sets up shop in town, he has a fake identity, and he waits for his mark. Then, of course, as it's supposed to in all "this is my last job" stories, and I love the cheeky kind of grin and wink that Stephen King gives us of, hey, I know I'm writing in this genre and I'm going to cater to you. Don't worry, I'm going to call myself out on this. I love when he does those little things for the reader. But because everything has to go wrong in these types of stories, of course it... And then we get to that halfway point that I talked about in that last video, and I don't want to give away too much after that because that's where things really get exciting and unknown in this book. So that's where I'm not going to give you any more spoilers. So there are two things that I really want to talk about with Billy Summers, and I think will be a good starting points for to jump off and give you my reactions. One is the marketing, and two is the writing style and the semantics that Stephen King uses. Well, and I guess three characterizations, but that's just a Kingism, and I have to talk about that. I feel like it's a given. So Billy Summers was marketed as a buddy story and a redemption story about a military vet who has PTSD after the Iraqi war. Okay, I'm not going to say that that is wrong, but that's not the book that I read, frankly. I'm not going to say that that is wrong entirely. That is what we get in this book, but I was expecting something very different from that description. First off, when it comes to the buddy story, the unlikely pairing, as it's being publicized, we don't even get that second person until right at that halfway through mark. So yes, they're an odd pairing. It's a fantastic view of the way these two different personality types will meet and depend on one another, simply because Stephen King is fantastic at writing these fully fleshed out characters. We know who both of these people are, Billy Summers and the person I'm not going to give away any more about. But the two of them go on this journey, and that's really the redemption part of Billy's story, because he feels guilty being an Iraq vet with this PTSD about the things that he did while he was in the army, and he tries to make it right. I'm not going to tell you how in any which way. That's for you to read, because the story itself is pretty fascinating. And by the way, since he meets her halfway through, quite frankly, I thought the first part of the story, while it was very well developed, and while it was a little bit of a slow burn about what was going on, I also wanted to know more about all these people. I wanted to spend more time with them. And same for the second half after we meet this person. I almost wish that King had written this to be like a Stand or an It length, although that probably really would have been overkill. I don't want to go that far. But, add another 200 or 300 pages to this thing and flesh some of that out a little more, or even do it in 2 parts, 2 companion books. He's done that in the past. So I think that would have been a better format for this exact story, to break it up into 2 halves, that we, the audience, get 2 physical halves. Somehow that was 3. I'm sticking with it. But when we talk about someone with PTSD, especially when the book is being publicized and advertised that way, I expect somebody who's having real difficulty, right? Somebody who has anxiety issues, somebody who has panic attacks. Billy never has any of those. We get some of his stories in the war, and they relate to what's happening in the present day. It's why he's thinking of them, or in the present story, rather. Trying to figure out how much to give away here. Yes, we hear about some of his experiences in Iraq, but I expected it to be a much larger portion of this book. It always relates to the story that we're currently reading, right? The present story versus what's happened to this character in the past. And that's why he thinks about these things, and he's writing about them in a book that he's writing within the book. Billy is writing a book, and he is faking that it's fiction, but it's really an autobiography examining his childhood and what led him to join the army and go to the Iraq War. So it pops up, we have the character thinking about it, but I didn't see a character that was riddled with PTSD. I saw someone who had some nightmares now and then, but we weren't treated to terrible nightmares. We were treated to war stories from a person who seems fairly well adjusted after the war. But all of that aside, okay, now here's where I'm going to get into a little bit more spoiler heavy of a review. But again, nothing that's going to give away anything that would ruin your enjoyment of the story. Just wanted to throw that in there. One of the things that I really, really appreciate about Billy Summers, outside of just the fantastic characterizations, because we fall in love with this very interesting, intriguing guy who is a clash of opposites, it would seem, that all live harmoniously in one head, and we're treated to his thoughts from the third-person omniscient narration. One of the things that I want to point out is the writing style, the actual semantics of the way that Stephen King writes. There are 3 at the very least, and there's one more that involves no. Not going to get in trouble. So we have the story that Stephen King is writing for us from Billy Summers' point of view. While Billy is in hiding as this hired assassin, he decides to write a novel, and because he's worried that people might be checking up on him, the people that hired him, they may have bugged his laptop, he starts writing in his dumb self. This is what Billy calls the character that he puts on for the people he works for. He reads comic books, not Emile Zola, like he really does when he's sitting in a hotel room alone. He speaks very simply. Nothing is too complicated. He cuts right to the chase. He just doesn't seem all that bright, and everyone treats him as such. But he's really a very, very intelligent man, and he decides he's going to try his hand at writing a book, so he starts writing it in the voice of his dumb self. And then after everything goes haywire and he decides to continue with the book, he fixes it up a little bit and starts writing as himself. So now we have Stephen King's voice, we have the dumb self of Billy Summers, and we have the real Billy Summers. So we're getting this interplay all the way through, and they're all similar because they're all coming from Billy's point of view, but they're different enough that we, the reader, understand who exactly is narrating this story for us. Billy in a made-up character, or the author himself. And this book, coupled with the buddy story, ends up in this weird kind of double ending and added extra epilogue that honestly, I don't want to give away why or how. I'm just not sure it was necessary. And when I get into my literary review later on in the readathon, I'm definitely going to dive into that. All right, so I want to go ahead and give you my rating. And keep in mind, I have not really dug into this and highlighted quotes and all these different things and made notes and all these things that I usually do when I make these reviews and I script things out. So this is just my first reading, my reaction as a reader, as an audience member who was presented with a story, I think that the characters are fascinating. I think that I wanted a lot of it to be more fleshed out. And I think that the story we got was engaging, and I'm happy that I read the book. I think that what Stephen King does with the semantics and the layering of secret identities on people, it keeps you thinking and keeps you guessing, and it really adds to the suspense. And that's what this is. It's not one of his horror novels, although he always writes suspense. Most of them just happen to be horror. This is a crime novel, if we want to fit it into any sort of genre. But that kind of secret identity, piecing the puzzle together that we have to do as the reader, keeps us very engaged. But simply because I went in expecting an odd couple buddy story that I didn't really get, and I went in expecting some huge psychologically trauma PTSD main character, which I didn't get, I still ultimately felt left down. Left down? I still ultimately felt let down. So, because the book was enjoyable, I feel like it deserves like a 3.5. When I dive into the literary merits, maybe even 4 stars. But from my personal reaction, from the mind frame of someone who bought the book knowing only the marketing materials and nothing else about it, I think I have to give Billy Summers 3 stars out of 5. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning into David's Den and this review of Billy Summers. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was helpful. I hope I didn't give away too many spoilers. And if you read the book, go ahead and comment down below. I want to know your thoughts. I want to have more of an interesting discussion about this and more in-depth. So if you want to give any sort of spoilers, please feel free, but make a note at the top of your comment, just so other people don't get mad at me for not getting mad at you, because that's kind of how these things work, apparently. I'm learning as I do this. So go ahead and like the video if you did, subscribe to the channel if you want to make sure you catch all the future reviews, the in-depth literary analysis. I compare the books to the cinematic or the television adaptations and see how they line up regarding theme and tone as well as plot, for how successful they are as an adaptation. It's what I'm doing right now with Chapelwaite, and if you want those episode reactions, again, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. If you want to follow me on social media, where I post things about Stephen King and the cats and the hamsters, my place is called David's Den, after all. My link tree is down in the description. You can find everything you might want and every endeavor I have going on right down there. See you guys next time.